The Scriptures tell us of the importance of studying God's Word. The psalmist writes, "Thy word is a lamp unto thy feet, and a light unto thy path." In another place, he continues, "How can a young man keep his way pure? By keeping it according to thy word." We at Calvary Chapel Worship Center believe in teaching through the Bible in its entirety. May your faith be increased at the hearing of God's Word. Here now is Pastor Rich.
One day I was sitting in church, not this one. I was sitting in church, and I was after the service. I was just sitting there and just praying, and it was just such a beautiful place and just such a beautiful thing. Just to be in church, just to sit there, and it was just such a great time we had of worship. And I was reading in the Scriptures, and I happened upon Psalm 27, and it begins, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" And that's such an encouragement. I was reading through, "The Lord is the defense of my life, whom shall I dread?" Such an encouraging word. Evildoers, adversary. "Though a host encamp against me, I will not fear. The war rise up against me. In spite of this, I shall be confident. One thing I have asked from the Lord, and that I shall seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his temple." And I stopped on those verses right there, and it just so caught me. You've read maybe a verse, and all of a sudden it just catches you. It just caught me, and I was reading that, and I thought, Lord, that is so good. What a beautiful thought. One thing I've asked from the Lord, and that I shall seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. And it was at that moment that I felt the Lord saying to me, I desire that you would be a pastor. It was my desire then to see what he meant. That I would dwell, you see, that became a beautiful thought for me. That I would dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his temple. Just became a beautiful thought. Tonight when we were worshiping, when we were all together, it just struck me how beautiful is this place. Not this is great, fine, but how beautiful is this place, is what God is doing here in my heart, in your hearts, our hearts together. How beautiful is this? How wonderful is this? And I think that the Lord would give us a fullness of our heart in his presence. And it's important for us to understand that he's giving us something. It's a gift that he would give to us. His presence and the power of his presence and the beauty of his presence is truly an awesome gift. And if we would understand what he is saying to us, what he's offering us there, that we would desire it. One thing I've asked from the Lord, and that I shall seek, that I would dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to meditate in his temple. And that's why we're here, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his temple. We are meditating upon the Word of God. We are receiving, in the Eastern mindset of meditating, they would sit and they would try to empty their minds. Think of nothing. Try to empty your mind and think of nothing. The way of a man of God is to do exactly the opposite. It is not to empty, but it's to fill. To fill your mind, to fill your heart with the beautiful things of the Lord. Think on these things, the Scripture says. All right, now with that in mind, let's turn to, I don't know why that just hit me. It just reminded me of that day when the Lord called me and said, I want you to be a pastor. But you see, it wasn't something that, the Lord had to twist my arm and say, oh, Lord, but I got other things I really want to do. It was, to meditate, to see the beauty of the Lord is a beautiful thing. All right, let's we're in Genesis chapter 30. Let's pick it up right there, because we're going to cover like 3 chapters today. Now, here's a man of faith right there. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she became jealous of her sister. All right, y'all got the context? Remember what's happened now. Jacob, heel snatcher, has deceived his brother and has run for his life, his mother giving him a cover. Jacob needs a wife, she said to Isaac. He needs to go to Laban's house. And so Jacob, not being the wiser, but, he knew that Jacob needed a wife, sent him on his way. Go ahead and get a wife. So off he goes. And when he goes to Laban's, neck of the woods, there's Rachel. And he meets Rachel. She's a shepherdess woman. And so that's very unusual. And she's a woman of the outdoors. And so he falls in love with her. And then so he says to Laban, I would work 7 years. He had no money. He had no dowry. I would work 7 years for Rachel. And so he did. Laban said, that's good. And so he worked for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, Laban pulled a number. If you remember now, Jacob, the name Jacob means heel snatcher, deceiver, conniver. And so when he went to Laban's house, many of the students of the Bible know there was something coming there. There's a little bit of poetic justice coming his way, because Laban himself is a bit of a conniver. And so when he goes up there, 7 years he works for Rachel, and then the wedding night. This is a tacky thing to do, I'll tell you right here. The wedding night, he switches out the bride, and he puts in her sister, her older sister, which he was not in love with. And so the next morning he wakes up, hey, whoa, now what is this? And so Laban, but my dear brother, didn't I explain to you that, the oldest sister, we cannot marry the oldest sister or the younger sister until the oldest sister's been married first, my dear brother. I don't know how I neglected to mention this to you. And so, I was very, 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 very sorry. And what is this? And if you want to, so 7 more years he works for Rachel. 14 years. The conniver has been connived. The deceiver has been deceived. That which a man sows, he shall also reap. Very interesting part of the story. Now, we then went on with the story that these women started to bear children. And so Leah, the Lord looked upon her that she was unloved. Well, and we understand to some degree he wasn't in love with Leah, he was in love with Rachel. But the Lord looks upon her with pity, and so she starts to have children. And we went through some of those children. And the Lord gave Leah an interesting bit of grace, a bit of glory, you could say, because those children, those first set of children, there was Judah, of the line of the Messiah was born from Leah. Levi of the priesthood was born from Leah, and of course the firstborn. And so, you see that grace. Well, now we pick it up in chapter 30. Rachel saw that she bore no children, so she was barren, and of course that in that culture was bad. It looked like God was against her and cursing her because she had no children. So she became jealous. And she became jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. Jealousy is a tough thing. Jealousy, when you're jealous of somebody else, man, it's a tough thing. And I think there's a little lesson there, just a small little bit of a lesson. When you see somebody else who seems to have more, they got this, they got better that, or whatever, and you start to get a little jealous, I tell you what, it's the beginning of the root of bitterness. And be very, very careful. Be very careful. And there's so much to understand. But continue on. Then Jacob's anger, it burned against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God? And am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? And so she said, well, here's my maid Bilhah. Bilhah, go into her, that she may bear in my knees, that through her I too may have children. Now, this was actually fairly common in that culture. Now, today, of course, that's not cool at all, not acceptable, of course. But in that day, it was fairly common that if a woman could not bear children, that she would use her handmaiden to be a surrogate mother. It was very common in that day. And so she says, here's my handmaiden. Let's have a children. She'll bear the child on my knees, which is to say, when the child is born, I will receive the child onto my own knees, and thus it will be my child. And thus you get the idea. So she gave him her maid Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her. They had relations. And Bilhah conceived and bore a son. Then Rachel said, God has vindicated me and has indeed heard my voice and has given me a son. And therefore she named him Dan, which means judged. In other words, the Lord has judged between me and Leah. And Dan, of course, became one of the tribes of Israel and was settled in the most northern area up by Mount Hermon. And we went to the area of Dan. And it really is a beautiful thing, right at the feet of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is the tallest mountain in Israel. It's actually kind of a series of mountains, kind of a group of mountains, and there's snow. And, we were trudging around in the snow in Israel. And it's just a really great thing. So anyway, that was Dan, all the way up in the north. Well, Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived another child and bore Jacob a second son. So Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and I have indeed prevailed. And so she named him Naphtali, which means wrestlings of God. Now, when Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, well, then she got, okay, now if Rachel could do that, then I'm going to do that too. And so she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And so Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. And so Leah said, how fortunate. And so she named him Gad, which means fortunate or fortune. And so Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for women will call me happy. So she named him Asher, which means with my happiness. Now, in the days of the wheat harvest, Reuben went out and he found mandrakes. Do you know what mandrakes are? It's a very interesting thing. He found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. And then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. And she said to her, is it a small matter for you to take my husband, that you would take my son's mandrakes too? So Rachel said, well, therefore, he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. All right, let's get a little understanding about what this is. First of all, mandrakes are a poisonous plant. But they were considered a potion that would cause a woman to have a baby if you take it in the smallest amounts. Obviously, if you took too much of it, it'd be poisonous. And the mandrake has this purple flower, and it's an interesting thing. When you pull it up from the ground, it actually has kind of two main roots that makes it look like a human with the top on it, the body and the two legs. It looks like a human. And thus, perhaps some wives' tales figured out that, that looks like a human. If you eat that, you'll have a baby. And but it's hallucinogenic. It's a drug. It's a bit of a hallucinogenic. But it was considered in that day that if you took some of the mandrake, that you could have a baby. And so, you see, that's why they were like, hey, he happened to find it, and it grows wild. He happened upon this mandrake. And so, hey, give me some of your son's mandrakes. And so she says, what? You've already taken my husband. Well, what kind of a turn is that? It was Laban that did this maneuver, But you want to take my son's mandrakes? So Rachel makes a deal. Now, this is amazing to me. When I see this little deal she makes. Look, Jacob can lie with you tonight if you give me some of the son's mandrakes. All right, so what continues on, Jacob, he's coming in from the field in the evening, and Leah goes out to meet him and says, hey, you have to come in to me tonight, for I've surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And so he lay with her that night. And this is what is going on with Jacob? He's just coming in from the field, he's coming home from the field, and Leah comes out to meet him, and hey, guess what? I made a deal, and you got to be in my tent tonight. Okay, whatever, Wait a minute, where's some leadership here? Are you with me on this? And then the women are making this deal, And here's the lesson. God knew what he was doing when he said, man shall have one wife. Man shall have one wife. Because this ain't good right here. This is not good. This is what you call a mess. And so God gave heed to Leah. See, now Rachel was pulling a little maneuver. Hey, give me some of your, these mandrakes, and then maybe I'll have a son. Leah sleeps with him, and she gets pregnant. Okay. God has given me my wages because I gave my maid to my husband, and so she named him Issachar, which means a man of hire. And Leah conceived again, and she bore a sixth son to Jacob. And so Leah said, God has endowed me with a good gift, and now my husband surely will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons. And so she named him Zebulun, meaning dwelling, that he might dwell. He will want to be with me. I've given him 6 sons, And that's supposed to be very impressive, that she's very, productive with boys. And so, surely he'll find me very wonderful. He'll want to be with me. So we continue with the story. Afterward, she bore a daughter, and she named him Dinah, which means judgment. Then God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb. So she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And so she named him Joseph, saying, may the Lord give me another son. Joseph means the one who increases, or increaser. Verse 25. Now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph, this is the famous Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, now send me away that I may go to my own place, to my own country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me depart, for you yourself know my service which I have rendered to you. But Laban said to him, now, if now it pleases you, stay with me. I have divined that the Lord has blessed me on your account. He's figuring out this Jacob is a blessed fellow. Stay with me, because when you're here, I'm blessed too. And he continued, name me your wages, name the wages, and I'll give it to you. But he said, well, you yourself know how I have served you and how your cattle have fared with me, for you have had little before I came, and it has increased to a multitude, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. But now, what shall I provide for my own household also? You can see they're kind of negotiating here. This is kind of the Middle Eastern way of negotiating. So he said, what should I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. Now, whenever a man says that, you know there's some deal coming. You shall not give me anything. If you do this, just this one thing, and I will again pasture and keep your flock. Let me pass through your entire flock today, removing from there every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black one among the lambs, and the spotted and the speckled ones among the goats, and such shall be my wages. That's all I want. That's just that one small thing. So, you see, this is how it will be. My honesty will answer for me later when you come concerning my wages, that everyone that's not speckled or spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, will be considered stolen. See, it'd be very easy. So Laban said, good, this is good. Let it be according to your word. So he removed on that day the striped, the spotted male goats, and all the speckled and spotted female goats, every one with white in it, and all the black ones among the sheep, and gave them into the care of his sons. And he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. So he's going to be the caregiver, but he's got these now separated out. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white stripes in them, exposing the white which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had peeled in front of the flocks in the gutters, even in the watering troughs, where the flocks came to drink. And they mated when they came to drink. So the flocks mated by the rods, and the flocks brought forth striped and speckled and spotted. By the way, it's interesting. You could do some research. There is actually a breed of sheep today which is called Jacob's sheep. I mean, you can look it up and see. It's a very interesting breed of sheep. These are striped and spotted. They're all striped and spotted sheep, and so the belief is that they came from the lineage. And interestingly, over time, Jacob's sheep, that's what they're called today, have multiple horns. Some of them have 2 horns on one side, and some have 3 horns on one side. Very, you can tell right away when the sheep's, got too many horns. And so these are today Jacob's sheep, but it goes back all the way back to this day when Jacob is doing a little, let's say, mating program. A little program that he's got to figure out, how he's going to increase. So now when you look at this story, really, some look at this and say, wait a minute, that doesn't work. Are you telling me that if you put a striped branch in front of a sheep, that he's going to have a striped baby? And that is not, I believe, what the Scripture is trying to teach us, but rather that Jacob knew how to train the sheep to breed as he wished to breed them. Jacob was a wise, let's say experienced herdsman and knew the trends and the way that the mating worked and the way it all worked. He was observing very carefully. And so he understood then how to cause the sheep that he wanted to mate, and the ones he didn't want to mate, they wouldn't mate. And so are you with me on this? Do I need to explain this? You see there's some birds and then there's some bees. Are you with me on this? And so we continue with the story. Now you might say, well, how does that work exactly? Well, it's important to keep in mind, which we're going to see in the next chapter, that Laban kept changing the wages. In fact, he says 10 times, Laban, he kind of saw what was going on. He said, no, wait a minute. It seems to me that when we say that Jacob gets the spotted and the speckled ones, that we get a lot of spotted and speckled sheep. And so he changed the wages. All right, we're going to change that. And he changes it around. And then, lo and behold, however he changes it, Laban's sheep end up being blessed. I mean, however Laban changes the deal, however he changes the labor, the wages for his labor, then it seems that Jacob's sheep are always blessed. Now, you say, well, how could that possibly be? Answer, because God was with him. Wherever he went, whatever he was doing, God was blessing him. So it's important to keep that in mind as we continue with the story. All right, for example, verse 39. So the flocks mated by the rods. And again, you can train animals to respond to various stimulus. So they mated by the rods, and the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs, and he made the lambs face toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban. And he put his own herds apart, and he did not, put them with Laban's flock. Moreover, and this is interesting, it came about that whenever the stronger of the flock were mating, that Jacob would place the rods in the sight of the flock in the gutters, so that they might mate by the rods. But when the flock was feeble, he did not put them in, so the feebler were Laban's and the stronger were Jacob's. So the men became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. All right, now we need to take this apart a minute because it's important. When Jacob, he's training the sheep to mate at will. I mean, in other words, when they're in heat, he wants the ones who are in heat to mate as he wants them to mate. And he's got this plan, this program going on. Now, Laban is switching his deal. He's switching his contract on him. And Jacob's got his own little plan going on. And whenever the strong ones are there, he gets them to mate. And the weak ones, no, he doesn't get them to mate. And so it works out that he gets the strong ones. Are you with me on this? Now, you look at this and you think, now, wait a minute. We got these two guys, Jacob and Laban. They're like in the competition of who can connive who and who can deceive who and who can manipulate who. You kind of get that idea, don't you? But at the same time, you get the idea that God is blessing Jacob. So, well, what is this? And it's very interesting because there's a mixture of faith and flesh in every one of us. Really, there's a mixture. And it's important to see that not one of us is perfect. Not one of us has perfectly pure motives. Not any one of us has perfectly pure motives. Not one. There's a mixture within all of us. If I was to do a poll and say, how many people in this room love the Lord? I think many people, don't raise your hands. But if I was to ask, how many people love the Lord? Many people would say, I love the Lord. Yet, sometime this next week, I think every one of us would do something that would belie that statement. Are you with me? Every one of us this next week will do something that will belie that statement. How many people love the Lord? Oh, I love the Lord. 3 days later, we blow our top about something. Oh, if you love the Lord, then what happened there? Or, we're at work, and a little something, and we tell, we didn't really want to admit it, so we kind of covered it a little bit. Oh, yeah? Well, I thought you said you love the Lord. Or, we're going through, and you get my point? All of us are a mixture. Not one of us is pure. But the point is that if we love the Lord, that God is doing something in our lives of changing us. We're all in the process of growing, we hope, right? We're in the process that God is changing us bit by bit by bit. And that as we grow closer to the Lord, indeed, we will find that our lives are being more like Him, our characters more like Him. But it doesn't all happen in a moment. It happens as we take step by step by step. And even to the end of the days, even when we're on our deathbed and we look back, we're going to see that we're still a mixture, though hopefully we're being more refined. The process of refining metal is such that you heat it, and the dross comes to the top, and then you skim it off. But you must continue to do that, to continue to refine it. God is continuing to refine us, even in the temple. When you take a look at the temple, you will see that the artifacts were gold overlaid on wood. The wooden artifacts were overlaid with gold. Not pure gold, but overlaid with gold. Thus, a mixture of pure gold overlaid on the wood. It's a great picture, I think, of the fact that all of us. When you see Jacob, now he's doing a little some interesting things here. Little, perhaps, selfish manipulation. He's blessing himself. He's still Jacob. He has not yet been truly changed. There's some things still hanging around in his life. I remember when I told you about my father when he came to the Lord at 75 years old. Now, it's an amazing thing to come to the Lord when you're 75 years old. And I remember when I was a kid and looking at his life and the way he was abusive and cussing and drunk, and I had all these feelings about him. And then all those years later, 75 years old, he comes to faith. He makes a decision in church. He raises his hand boldly. I want to accept Jesus Christ. Baptized him just a few weeks later. There he was. Now, the question is, did he become a brand new man overnight? No. He made the decision. He was clearly saying what was in his heart. But he still had some of the tendencies. God still had to work some things. Is God working anything in your life? Amen? So you can look, and God is still doing some things of changing. So we see that in Jacob. All right, chapter 31. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons. And they said, but Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all his wealth. Well, now Jacob saw that the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly toward him as it once was. Then the Lord said to Jacob, now it's time. Return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field. In other words, let's talk privately here. And he said to them, I see your father's attitude, that it's not friendly towards me as it once was, but the God of my father has been with me. And you know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to hurt me. If he spoke thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all of the flock brought forth speckled. And if he spoke thus, the striped shall be your wages, then all of the flock brought forth striped. Thus God had taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. And it came about at the time when the flock were mating that I lifted up my eyes and I saw in a dream. And behold, the male goats which were mating were striped, speckled, and mottled. And the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up now your eyes and see that all the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban has done and been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar. Remember, Bethel was the place when Jacob was running for his life. It was there that Jacob, when he laid down to go to sleep, because he was on the run, he had nothing but the staff in his hand, he had a dream. And there that night, God met him in that dream. And in that dream, he saw a ladder from the earth to the heaven with the angels of God descending and ascending on it. And God, standing at the top of it, said, I am the God of your father Abraham and your father Isaac, and I will bless you wherever you go. And he said, this is the same. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. So Rachel and Leah answered and said, do we still have any portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not reckoned by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. Now, let's look at that for just a minute. A little cultural insight. He has consumed our purchase price. In that culture, when a man gave the father a dowry, the father was supposed to keep that dowry, actually, and invest it. In other words, to keep it in behalf of his daughter, so that if that man was to divorce his wife, if that man was at some point to divorce his wife and to put her aside, that he would have that dowry, which came from the man, he would have that dowry, which he would then give to his daughter to support his daughter. You see? So that means something when you see they are quite bothered by this. Look, he has even spent, you see, our portion, our inheritance. What do we have? He's even consumed our purchase price. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, do whatever God has said to you to do. Then Jacob arose and put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove them away. He drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had gathered, and acquired livestock which he had gathered in Padan Aram, and to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Now, when Laban had gone to shear his flock, then Rachel went in and stole some of the household idols that were her father's. Okay, this is not good. Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was fleeing. So he fled with all that he had, and he arose and he crossed the Euphrates River, and he set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. That's the land of his father. When it was told to Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, then he took his kinsman with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. And God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night, and he said to him, be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad. So Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, what have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and did not tell me so that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs and with timbrel and with lyre, and did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to hurt you. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob. And now you have indeed gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? And Jacob said to Laban, Jacob answered and said, because I was afraid, for I said, lest you would take your daughters from me by force. This is why he's leaving it, secret. The one with whom you find your gods, he says, however, that one shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, I want you to point out what is yours among my belongings and take it for yourself. For Jacob did not know that it was Rachel who had stolen those gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two maids, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent, and he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddle, and she was sitting on them. And Laban felt through the tent, but he did not find them. And she said then to her father, let my lord not be angry, but I cannot rise before you, for I am in the manner of women. She's on her period. So he searched, but he did not find the household idols. Then Jacob became angry, and he contended with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, "What is my transgression? What is my sin, that you have so hotly pursued me? Though you have felt through all my goods, what have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. And that which was torn of beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. You required it of my hand, whether stolen or by day or stolen by night. Thus I was by day, the heat consumed me, and by frost at night, and my sheep fled from my eyes. In these 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for you 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you've changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the toil of my hands, so he has rendered judgment last night." Then Jacob answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, these children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. What can I do this day to these daughters or to these children whom you have borne? So now come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let us be a witness. Let it be a witness between you and me." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather more stones." So they took stones and made a big heap. And there they ate by that heap. And Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha. But Jacob called it Gilead. Jegar means liver, by the way, in Farsi. It's interesting, which is in Iranian. So it means liver. It's very interesting. So we continue. And Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me this day." Therefore it was named Gilead. And Mizpah, for he said, "May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me." And Laban said to Jacob, "Behold this heap, and behold the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass by this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Jacob and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, let him judge between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his kinsmen on the meal. And they ate the meal and spent the night on the mountain. And early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned to his place. Whew. All right. Now, so his relationship to Laban is over. And now he's going to put his eyes toward home, and he's going to encounter all the things that are coming before him. But let's put a close to this relationship to Laban and understand a few things. What has happened? Why did God send him? Well, we know that, of course, he received a wife. All that was important. Actually, several wives. And many children. And God said that he would bless him. So he's blessed him with many children. But along the way, he's learning many things. We could summarize those lessons, and let's do it. First of all, that which a man sows, he shall reap. The one who lives by the methods of conniving will himself suffer from conniving. The one who deceives will be deceived. Whatever a man sows, he shall reap. It is an interesting thing as we see the hand of the Lord. And thus, the lesson for each one of us is, hey, walk in the character of the Lord Almighty and trust that he will bless you. At the same time, it's interesting to note, when we were studying earlier, when Jacob, after he had his 2 wives, he then wanted, hey, what am I going to have for myself? I need something, for my prosperity. He said, the Lord has blessed me wherever I have turned. And it was true. And Laban noticed it as well. The Lord blessed him wherever he turned. And it's interesting because Jacob, when you see his life, he started to really grow in something. He started to really grow in the knowledge and the belief that God was going to be with him. God had promised it, and God convinced him, and he started to believe it, that God was going to bless him wherever he went. And it's a very interesting thing, because there is for us a lesson. How are we going to live in this life? How are we going to walk in this world? And it really comes down to something important that is relevant to every one of us. Whether or not we will believe that God indeed has his hand in our lives. And it really comes down to also how we believe and how we feel about ourselves. It's a very interesting thing. Many people struggle with what today could be called poor self-image. People, it seems, have two extremes in their personality. Many people struggle with poor self-esteem. Do you know what I mean by that? They think very poorly of themselves. And it seems that we kind of swing from, we know we don't like feeling bad about ourselves. And so we try to struggle and get ourselves out of it. But then the pendulum swings to the other side. And the other side is, then we start to feel very self-assured. And we start becoming very prideful. And we start to feel very cocky and very, I'm really something. Aren't I something? You should see me. I'm really something. And then, of course, we get knocked down by the reality of life. And then pretty soon we're like really feeling bad about ourselves. And, I'm really a stinky person. And I'm really, and we start, just really feeling bad. And I'm worth nothing. And I'm unlovable. And I'm unworthy. And we don't like feeling that way. So we struggle to come out of it. And then we start to come out of it. And we start feeling really good about ourselves. And aren't I something? Have you seen me lately? I'm really something. And is this the way we're going to live our lives? Do we swing from, I feel so terrible about myself, I'm just a worm, I'm worth nothing, and then we swing to the other side, oh, you should see me today, I'm really something, you should see me. Is this the way we're going to live our lives? Is there no alternative? Is there anything else? Is there anything better? To which I submit, there is absolutely something much better. You know what it is? It's living neither in either of these, but living in this place. God said that he would put his hand on my life. Therefore, I will rest on that truth. It's not about how great I am, because this is pride. And it will stop the blessing of God in my life. If I think that I'm the power of my life, there's no hand of blessing in it. But there's no place of blessing over here either. If I think, I'm unworthy and I'm a worm and I'm of no use at all, that's not what God believes. This is what God believes. I will be the strength of your life. I will be the hope of your life. I will be the joy of your life. I will be the peace of your life. I will be the strength of your life. I'll be the assurance of your life. Take confidence in me, in my hand in your life. I will be with you wherever you go. There's no room for self-assurance and cockiness in that. There's neither room for being so wormy that we're of so disgustingly of no worth. That's not what God's word says. I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. Child, you're mine. You know what? He says, I bought you with a price. I bought you with a price. I paid for the salvation of your soul with the blood of my Son, Jesus Christ. Would you devalue that? The price that I paid? Would you not value what I have paid for you? I say that you're my